My name is Olivia Sanders, and I'm 23 years old. The constant throb in my knee has become my unwelcome companion since my senior year volleyball injury. My parents called my surgery too expensive despite the doctor's warnings. Then last month, they surprised my sister Madison with a brand new BMW worth $65,000. The betrayal cut deeper than the pain in my deteriorating knee. But my grandfather Samuel has always seen me clearly when my parents looked right through me. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt the sting of family favoritism. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. While other kids spent weekends at sleepovers or hanging out at the mall, I was busy maintaining my 4.0 GPA, practicing volleyball until my muscles screamed, and helping around the house. My parents, Robert and Diana Sanders, set high expectations, and I worked tirelessly to meet them. Volleyball wasn't just a sport for me, it was my ticket to freedom. I dreamed of earning an athletic scholarship that would take me far from our small Connecticut town. During practice, when my feet left the ground for a spike, those few seconds of flight felt like pure possibility. Coach Wilson said I had real potential, and college scouts were starting to notice. Then there was Madison, my sister, younger by 4 years and different from me in every way. Where I was dedicated and disciplined, Madison flitted between interests like a hummingbird between flowers. One month it was painting, the next piano lessons, none lasting longer than her fleeting enthusiasm. Yet somehow, each new passion warranted expensive equipment or private tutoring that my parents readily provided. Madison is finding herself, Mom would explain when I questioned the double standard. Not everyone knows their path as early as you did, Olivia. But the truth was stark and simple. Madison was the favorite. The golden child. The baby who could do no wrong. When I needed new volleyball shoes, Mom suggested I babysit to earn the money. When Madison wanted a $400 prom dress, it appeared in her closet within days. When I earned academic honors, there were nods of approval. When Madison barely passed algebra, there was a celebration dinner at an expensive restaurant for trying her best. Only Grandpa Samuel seemed to notice the disparity. Dad's father, a retired judge with kind eyes and a spine of steel, lived an hour away but visited often enough to see the pattern. "You're something special, kiddo," he told me one afternoon after watching my volleyball tournament. We sat on his porch, drinking lemonade as the summer sun dipped toward the horizon. "Don't ever let anyone dim your light." He was the one who drove 3 hours to pick me up when I missed the bus home from a debate competition. He remembered every achievement without being reminded. When I graduated as valedictorian, it was his proud tears that meant the most. Everything changed during the state semifinals my senior year. We were down by 2 points in the final set. The ball came my way, and I leaped higher than ever before, determined to score. The spike was perfect, earning us the point, but my landing wasn't. My right knee twisted unnaturally beneath me. The sound it made, a sickening pop, still haunts my dreams. The team doctor rushed onto the court as white-hot pain shot through my leg. "Possible ACL tear," he murmured to the coach. "She needs to get to a hospital." My parents were in the stands, but it was my best friend Taylor who rode in the ambulance with me, holding my hand through every jolt and bump. "Your parents are following in their car," the paramedic assured me. "They'll meet you at the hospital." They did, eventually, 2 hours later. Madison had been hungry, so they stopped for dinner first. The diagnosis came the next day: complete ACL tear, severe meniscus damage, and a tibial plateau fracture. The orthopedic specialist, Dr. Patel, didn't sugarcoat it. "Without surgery, you're looking at chronic pain, limited mobility, and early-onset arthritis," she explained, showing me the MRI images. "With proper surgical intervention and physical therapy, you could regain most, if not all, functionality." Hope flickered. Surgery meant a chance to walk without pain, to maybe even play recreationally one day. But that hope dimmed when I saw my parents exchange that look, the one that passed between them whenever Madison wanted something expensive. The difference was, this wasn't a want. This was a need. I tried to push through. Started college on a partial academic scholarship at State University, limping across campus, wincing up staircases, swallowing pain relievers like candy. Taylor, who chose the same university, watched me struggle with growing concern. "This isn't right, Liv," she said one night, finding me crying in our shared bathroom after a particularly painful day. "You need that surgery. Your parents should be helping you." But asking for help meant admitting weakness, and in the Sanders family, weakness was an unforgivable sin. At least for me. 3 months into my freshman year, the pain became unbearable. Dr. Patel's warning echoed in my mind. Without surgery, permanent damage was inevitable. I'd been taking maximum doses of over-the-counter pain medications, wearing a bulky brace, and still, simple tasks like climbing the 3 flights to my American literature class left me breathless and teary. One Sunday evening, I sat on my dorm room bed, surrounded by textbooks and a half-finished essay. My knee throbbed in angry protest of the day's activities. I reached for my phone and stared at my parents' contact information, my thumb hovering over the call button. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. "Just ask them." Taylor walked in with 2 cups of coffee and immediately read my expression. "Calling the parents?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "I can't keep living like this. Want me to leave?" "No," I said quickly. "Please stay." Taylor gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze and sat beside me as I pressed call and put the phone on speaker. Mom answered on the 4th ring. "Olivia? Is everything okay? It's almost 9. "Hi, Mom. I need to talk to you and Dad about something important." There was shuffling on the other end. Then Dad's voice joined in. "What's going on? Are your grades slipping?" Of course, that would be his first concern. "No, Dad. I have all A's. It's about my knee. It's getting worse." Dr. Patel was right. I need the surgery. Silence stretched across the line, taut and uncomfortable. "Honey," Mom finally said, her voice softening in that way that always preceded bad news. "We discussed this. Those kinds of specialized surgeries are so expensive." "I know, but insurance would cover part of it," I pressed. "And Dr. Patel says if I wait too long, the damage might be irreversible." Dad cleared his throat. "Do you have any idea what medical procedures cost these days?" "We're talking tens of thousands of dollars, Olivia. We can't just throw that kind of money around." My fingers tightened around the phone. "I'm not asking you to throw money around. I'm asking for help with a necessary medical procedure. Have you looked into alternative treatments?" Mom suggested. "Your cousin Beth had good results with that acupuncturist for her back pain." Taylor's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "This isn't back pain, Mom. My ACL is completely torn. No amount of acupuncture is going to fix that." "Don't take that tone," Dad warned. "We're trying to help." "Are you?" The words escaped before I could stop them. Another heavy silence. "Look," Dad said eventually, his businessman voice taking over. "Why don't you get a better job? Something that pays more than that coffee shop. Start saving up. Maybe by next year. Next year. By then, I might not be able to walk without assistance. I'm already working 20 hours a week on top of a full course load," I reminded them. "The surgery costs $45,000 with our insurance. How am I supposed to save that kind of money?" "We all have to make sacrifices," Olivia, Mom said, her voice suddenly distant. "Your father and I worked hard for everything we have." The conversation continued in circles until I couldn't take it anymore. I thanked them for their time and ended the call, dropping my phone onto the bed as if it had burned me. Taylor wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "I can't believe them." I couldn't either, but part of me wasn't surprised. This was just another verse in a song I'd been hearing my whole life. Madison's needs were necessities, mine were inconveniences. The next few weeks became increasingly difficult. Stairs were my enemy. The 10-minute walk across campus stretched to 20, then 30 as I had to stop frequently to rest. I started leaving for class 30 minutes early just to ensure I'd arrive on time. One afternoon, I found myself unable to stand after sitting through a 2-hour lecture. Taylor had to help me up, the other students staring as I bit my lip to keep from crying out. "This is ridiculous," Taylor muttered as she helped me limp outside. "Call your grandfather." I shook my head. "I can't ask him for that kind of money." "You're not asking. You're telling him what's happening. He deserves to know, and your parents obviously aren't telling him." She was right. That evening, I called Grandpa Samuel. "Livy," he answered warmly. "What a wonderful surprise. How's my favorite scholar?" The familiar nickname broke something inside me. "Not great, Grandpa." His tone immediately shifted. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" I explained everything. The continuing pain, the doctor's warnings, my parents' refusal to help. He listened without interrupting, though I could hear his breathing grow heavier with each detail. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked when I finished. "I didn't want to worry you. And I didn't want to put you in the middle of things with Dad." "You let me worry about your father," he said firmly. "Now, have you scheduled a follow-up with your doctor? I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The "we" nearly made me cry. Meanwhile, I tried to find ways to earn extra money. I picked up additional shifts at the campus coffee shop, despite the agony of standing for hours. I offered tutoring services, joined a medical study that paid participants, and even donated plasma twice a month. My small savings grew painfully slowly. At this rate, I'd have enough for surgery sometime in my 30s, long after the damage became permanent. Madison called occasionally, chattering about her freshman year at Westfield College, the private university our parents had happily paid for despite her mediocre grades. She never asked about my knee, though she knew about the injury. When I mentioned the pain once, she quickly changed the subject to her new boyfriend or the sorority she was pledging. "You wouldn't believe the parties here, Liv," she gushed during one call. "College is so amazing." I looked down at the ice pack on my knee, the bottle of ibuprofen on my nightstand, and the stack of medical bills I was slowly chipping away at. "Yeah," I replied hollowly. "Amazing." Winter break arrived with a blanket of snow and the promise of 3 weeks away from campus stairs and long walks between buildings. I drove my 8-year-old Honda back home, wincing every time I had to press the clutch with my bad knee. The Sanders family home looked like a holiday card, white lights outlining the roof and windows, a wreath on the glossy red door. Mom had always gone all out for Christmas, especially for Madison, who still received presents from Santa despite being 19 years old. I parked on the street since the driveway was full, Mom's SUV, Dad's sedan, and Grandpa Samuel's trusty old pickup truck. He must have come for dinner, which instantly lifted my spirits. At least I'd have one ally at the table. Madison flung open the front door before I could knock. "Olivia. Finally. You're missing all the excitement." She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed with anticipation, bouncing on her toes like she used to do on Christmas mornings as a child. "What excitement?" I asked, dragging my suitcase up the porch steps with a grimace. "You'll see. Mom and Dad have the biggest surprise ever. They made me wait until you got here to reveal it." That was unexpected. Usually, Madison wouldn't delay gratification for anything, least of all my arrival. Inside, the house smelled of pine and cinnamon. Mom was arranging appetizers on the dining room table while Dad and Grandpa Samuel sat in the living room, an obvious tension between them. "Olivia's here," Madison announced unnecessarily. "Can we do it now? Please?" Mom smiled indulgently. "Let your sister get settled first, sweetie." "It's fine," I said, curious despite myself. "What's going on?" Dad stood up, clapping his hands together with theatrical enthusiasm. "Well, since we're all here, I guess now's as good a time as any. Everyone grab your coats. We have something to show Madison." "Not us. Madison." We filed outside, Madison practically vibrating with excitement. Dad led us down the driveway toward the street, then dramatically pulled a small remote from his pocket and pressed a button. The garage door began to rise. Inside, gleaming under the overhead lights, sat a brand new BMW sedan, complete with an enormous red bow on the hood. "Surprise!" Mom and Dad shouted in unison. Madison screamed, jumping up and down. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Is this for real? Is this mine?" "All yours, princess," Dad confirmed, dangling the keys. "You mentioned wanting something safer than the Civic, and well, your mother and I agree that our baby girl deserves the best." Madison snatched the keys and ran to the car, running her hands reverently over its sleek blue surface. "It's the exact model I wanted." "How did you know?" "You left the browser open on the family computer," Mom laughed. Subtle hint taken. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. The cold air seemed to crystallize in my lungs. Beside me, Grandpa Samuel had gone very still. "What model is it?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "BMW 3 Series," Dad answered proudly. "Top safety ratings, great fuel economy for its class, and all the latest technology." "And the cost?" Grandpa pressed. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Well, we got a good deal. Year-end clearance and all that." "Robert," Grandpa's tone sharpened. "How much?" "Base price is $55,000, Dad admitted. With the premium package and extended warranty, it came to around $65,000. $65,000. $20,000 more than my knee surgery. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the garage door frame to steady myself, but it wasn't just physical imbalance threatening to topple me. It was the sheer weight of the revelation. My parents had $65,000 for Madison's want but nothing for my medical need. "Congratulations, Madison," I managed to say, the words tasting like ash. "That's quite a gift." Madison barely looked at me, too busy exploring the car's interior. "The leather seats are heated. And look at the sound system." Mom must have noticed something in my expression because she came over and placed a hand on my arm. "Isn't it wonderful? Madison's been through so much this semester, adjusting to college and all. We thought she deserved something special." Something inside me snapped. "Something special," I repeated slowly. "Like being able to walk without pain? Like not developing arthritis in my 20s. Mom's smile faltered. "Olivia, don't start. This is Madison's moment. 2 months ago, I begged you for help with a surgery that costs $45,000. A necessary medical procedure. You said you couldn't afford it." The garage went quiet except for the soft beeping of Madison testing various buttons on the dashboard. "That's different," Dad said stiffly. "How?" I demanded, my voice rising. "How is it different?" "Don't make a scene," Mom hissed, glancing nervously at Madison, who had finally tuned into the tension. "A scene? You want to talk about scenes? How about the scene where I collapse in class because I can't take the pain anymore? Or the scene where my doctor tells me I'll need a knee replacement before I'm 30 because the damage has become irreversible?" Dad stepped forward, his face darkening. "That's enough, Olivia. We make the financial decisions in this family, and we decided a safe, reliable car for your sister was a priority. A BMW isn't about safety. It's about status. You could have bought her a Toyota with 5-star safety ratings for $20,000 and put the rest toward my surgery." "The surgery might not even work," Mom interjected. "Dr. Patel said herself there are no guarantees." I stared at her in disbelief. "She said the success rate is over 90% for someone my age. Those are better odds than Madison even graduating college, statistically speaking." "Hey," Madison protested from inside her new car. Grandpa Samuel placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "I think we should continue this discussion inside," he suggested quietly. But I was beyond reason. Months of pain and disappointment crystallized into a clarity I'd never experienced before. "When exactly did you buy this car?" I asked. My parents exchanged glances. "Last month," Dad finally admitted. "We wanted to wait until Christmas to surprise her." "Last month," I repeated. Right after you told me you couldn't afford my surgery. The silence confirmed everything. I turned and limped back into the house, grabbed my suitcase from the entryway where I'd left it, and headed for the door. Olivia, don't be dramatic, Mom called after me. Where are you going? Back to my apartment, I said without turning around. But you just got here. It's Christmas break. I'd rather be alone than be where I'm clearly not valued. Dad's footsteps followed me. Now wait just a minute, young lady. You don't get to speak to us that way. I whirled around, ignoring the stabbing pain the sudden movement sent through my knee. You chose a luxury car over your daughter's health and future. I think I'm entitled to a few harsh words. I left before they could respond, throwing my suitcase into my old Honda and driving away from the house I'd grown up in, tears blurring the road ahead. Back at my nearly empty campus apartment, I called Taylor, who was visiting her parents in Ohio. They bought her a BMW, I said when she answered, not bothering with hello. $65,000 for a car when they told me they couldn't afford $45,000 for my surgery. Taylor was silent for a moment. Holy shit, Liv. I don't even have words. Neither did I. Just a hollow ache that had nothing to do with my knee. Later that night, I overheard a conversation through the thin walls separating our kitchen from our neighbors. My parents had called them, apparently worried when I hadn't answered their calls. She's fine, Mrs. Sanders, my neighbor Rachel assured them. I just saw her getting some ice from the freezer. A pause as she listened. Well, maybe she needs some space. No, I understand you're concerned. Yes, I'll tell her you called. Again. After Rachel hung up, she knocked softly on my bedroom door. Your mom called. She sounds pretty upset. Thanks for letting me know, I replied flatly. She mentioned something about family finances being tight after some big purchase. Said they might not be able to send your usual allowance this month. I laughed bitterly. Of course they can't. The irony was almost too perfect. They spend a small fortune on Madison's dream car, then claim financial hardship when it comes to supporting me. The pattern was so familiar it almost felt like comfort in its predictability. That night, lying in bed with an ice pack on my knee, I made a decision. I would stop expecting my parents to treat me fairly. I would stop hoping they would suddenly see me as they saw Madison. I would focus only on what I could control, my education, my health, and my future, whatever limited version of it might now be possible. I just didn't realize how quickly that future would come crashing down around me. By February, walking had become an exercise in endurance. Each step sent lightning bolts of pain from my knee up through my thigh and down to my ankle. The campus disability services provided me with a temporary parking permit that allowed me to drive between buildings, but even that small mercy couldn't offset the deterioration happening inside my joint. Dr. Patel's face was grim when I visited her office for a follow-up. She manipulated my knee gently, noting my winces and sharp intakes of breath. The instability has worsened, she said, helping me sit up on the examination table. I'm ordering a new MRI, but I can already tell you what it's going to show. More damage, I supplied dully. She nodded. The torn ACL is allowing your knee to move in ways it shouldn't. This is causing progressive damage to the cartilage and meniscus. Additionally, the tibial plateau fracture hasn't healed properly without surgical intervention. What does that mean for me? Long term. Dr. Patel sat down, meeting my eyes directly. Without surgery, and soon, you're looking at chronic, debilitating pain. Limited mobility that will worsen over time. Probable knee replacement surgery by 30, possibly earlier. And even with a replacement, you'll never have the same function you could have had with timely ACL reconstruction. I swallowed hard. And with surgery? If we operate soon, we can still salvage a good outcome. Not perfect, the window for optimal results has passed, but good. You could lead a normal, active life with minimal limitations. How soon is soon? Ideally, within the next month. I closed my eyes, doing mental calculations. My savings stood at just under $8,000. Not even a fifth of what I needed. I'll figure something out, I told her, not believing it myself. When the new MRI results came back, they confirmed everything Dr. Patel had predicted and revealed additional bone spurs forming where they shouldn't. The clock wasn't just ticking, it was racing toward a finish line I couldn't possibly reach in time. Desperate to accelerate my savings, I took on more hours at the coffee shop, despite Taylor's increasingly vocal concerns. You can barely stand for 20 minutes, Liv. How are you going to manage an 8-hour shift? I don't have a choice, I replied, swallowing 2 pain pills with my morning coffee. The manager, Keith, was sympathetic but firm. I need someone who can move quickly during rush periods. Are you sure you're up for this? Absolutely, I lied. I'm managing the pain much better now. That was far from true. The pain had become a living thing, a monster that grew hungrier and more demanding each day. It woke me at night, accompanied me to classes, and colored every interaction with its persistent presence. 3 weeks after increasing my hours, the inevitable happened. It was the afternoon rush, the cafe packed with students seeking caffeine before evening classes. I'd been on my feet for 6 straight hours, ignoring the warning signals my body was frantically sending. I was carrying a tray of clean mugs from the dishwasher when my knee simply gave out. No warning, no gradual buckling, just a sudden, complete failure. The tray crashed to the floor, mugs shattering across the tile, and I followed, collapsing in a heap amid the broken ceramic. The pain was indescribable. White-hot agony radiated from my knee, stealing my breath, vision narrowing to a pinpoint. Someone was screaming. It took several seconds to realize it was me. Keith was beside me instantly. Don't move, Olivia. Someone call an ambulance. No ambulance, I gasped. Can't afford it. But Keith was already on the phone with 911, describing the situation. Around us, customers stood in shocked silence or hurried to clear space. Taylor, who had been studying in the corner, pushed through the crowd. Liv. Oh my God. The paramedics arrived quickly, their efficient movements and calm questions creating a center of order in the chaos. They strapped me to a backboard despite my continued protests about the cost. Your knee's completely unstable, one explained gently. Moving you without proper support could cause additional damage. The ride to the hospital passed in a blur of pain and fear. Taylor followed in her car after calling my parents. They're on their way, she told me in the emergency room as doctors ordered x-rays and administered painkillers. Should be here in a few hours. The orthopedic surgeon on call, Dr. Mercer, didn't waste time with platitudes after reviewing my scans. The damage is extensive, he told me, pointing to areas on the x-ray. The knee gave out because the ACL is completely non-functional and there's significant additional tearing in the meniscus. You need surgery, and you needed it months ago. I know, I whispered, the painkillers making my tongue feel thick. Can't afford it. Dr. Mercer frowned. This isn't elective cosmetic surgery we're talking about. This is necessary treatment to prevent permanent disability. Before I could respond, my parents burst into the treatment area, Mom's face pale with worry, Dad looking irritated at the inconvenience. Olivia. Mom rushed to my side. What happened? Are you okay? Her knee collapsed, Taylor explained when I didn't immediately answer. The doctor says she needs surgery right away. Dad stepped forward. What kind of surgery are we talking about? What's the prognosis? Dr. Mercer explained the situation again, emphasizing the urgency. Without surgical intervention immediately, your daughter faces a future of chronic pain and limited mobility. Even with surgery, the prolonged delay means she may never regain full function. And the cost? Dad asked, his expression already closing off. Your insurance should cover a significant portion. The hospital financial services can discuss the details with you. Mom squeezed my hand. We'll figure something out, honey. But I saw the look she exchanged with Dad, the same one from months ago when Dr. Patel first recommended surgery. Nothing had changed. Don't bother, I said, the words slurring slightly from the medication. I know where I stand in the family budget. Dad's face hardened. This isn't the time or place, Olivia. When is the time? After I'm permanently disabled? After I've dropped out of college because I can't physically make it to class. A nurse entered, interrupting the brewing argument. We're admitting you overnight for pain management and to monitor for any secondary issues. The orderly will be here soon to take you to your room. As if on cue, Madison appeared in the doorway, still wearing her coat, car keys dangling from her finger. I got here as fast as I could, she announced. The parking in this place is awful. I had to park like a mile away. She approached the bed, finally seeming to notice the gravity of the situation. Whoa, Liv, you look terrible. What happened? Before anyone could answer, she continued, and why is everyone looking so serious? It's just anything, right? Like when you fell during that volleyball game. The casual dismissal of the injury that had dominated my life for over a year was the final straw. It's not just a knee thing, Madison, I snapped. It's an injury that's getting worse because Mom and Dad decided your BMW was more important than my ability to walk without pain. Madison's eyes widened. That's not fair. I didn't ask them to buy me the car instead of paying for your surgery. Didn't you? Because I distinctly remember you showing Mom and Dad BMW brochures right after they told me they couldn't afford my surgery. I didn't know about that. Madison protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. You knew, I insisted. You've always known. You just didn't care because you always get what you want. That's enough, Dad interrupted. Madison, go wait in the hallway. Your mother and I need to speak with the doctor. But I just got here, Madison complained. And I drove all the way from Westfield. In your brand new BMW, I added bitingly. Must have been such a hardship. Madison stormed out, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment. I couldn't tell which. The nurse who had been adjusting my fore looked uncomfortable. I'll give you folks some privacy, she murmured, but not before giving my parents a look that clearly communicated her opinion of the family dynamics she'd witnessed. Once we were alone with Dr. Mercer, Dad shifted into negotiation mode. What are our options here? Is there anything less invasive we could try first? Dr. Mercer's professional demeanor didn't slip, but his voice took on an edge. Mr. Sanders, your daughter has already exhausted all conservative treatment options. She's been dealing with this injury for over a year without proper intervention. The window for optimal recovery is closing rapidly. But surely there must be alternatives to immediate surgery, Mom suggested, her hand still clutching mine in a grip that felt more restraining than comforting. I pulled my hand away. There aren't. I've researched everything. I've tried everything I could afford. This is happening because you chose not to help me when it would have made a difference. The painkillers were making me bold, loosening the restraints I'd always placed on my resentment. We didn't have that kind of money then, Dad insisted, but the lie sounded hollow even to him. But you had $65,000 for a luxury car? I challenged. Make it make sense, Dad. Explain to me how that math works. He had no answer. As they wheeled me to my hospital room, leaving my parents to deal with admission paperwork, I felt oddly detached from the situation. The physical pain was temporarily muted by medication, but the emotional wound was raw and gaping. Taylor stayed with me, sitting beside the hospital bed in uncomfortable silence. I'm calling your grandfather, she finally said, reaching for her phone. This time, I didn't object. Grandpa Samuel arrived at the hospital just after dawn the next morning. I woke to find him sitting in the chair beside my bed, his weathered hands clasped together, eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that suggested he'd been watching me sleep for some time. Grandpa, I whispered, throat dry from sleep and medication. You didn't have to come. There's nowhere else I should be, he replied simply, reaching for the water pitcher on the bedside table and pouring me a cup. Taylor called me last night. Told me everything. I took a sip of water, grateful for its coolness. I didn't want to worry you. Family worries about family, he said, a strange emphasis on the word family that I couldn't quite interpret. That's how it's supposed to work, anyway. A nurse came in to check my vitals and adjust my pain medication. After she left, Grandpa moved his chair closer. "I want you to tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning. No editing to spare my feelings or your father's reputation. I need to know exactly what's been happening." So I did. I told him about the initial injury, the doctor's recommendations, my parents' refusal to help financially. I described the increasing pain, the failed attempts to save enough money, and finally, the devastating discovery of Madison's new car. Grandpa Samuel listened without interrupting, his expression growing more grave with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I knew your father favored Madison," he finally said. "I've spoken to him about it many times over the years. But this..." He shook his head, a muscle working in his jaw. "This crosses a line I didn't think even Robert would cross." He stood up suddenly, straightening to his full height. Despite being in his 70s, Grandpa Samuel was still an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered with the commanding presence of the judge he once was. "I'm going to make one call," he said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of steel that sent a shiver down my spine. "Then we're going to fix this." He stepped out into the hallway, phone already in hand. Through the partially open door, I could hear the low rumble of his voice, though not the words. The call was brief, but seemed to accomplish whatever he intended, because when he returned, there was a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Your parents will be here within the hour," he informed me. "I've also asked Dr. Mercer to join us. I want to hear the medical situation directly from him, with everyone present." True to his word, my parents arrived 45 minutes later. They entered the room cautiously, as if approaching a trap they suspected but couldn't avoid. "Dad," my father acknowledged Grandpa stiffly. "Olivia, how are you feeling this morning?" "About the same," I answered truthfully. Mom hovered near the foot of the bed, uncertainty written across her features. "Did you sleep okay? Hospital beds are so uncomfortable." Before I could respond, Grandpa Samuel cut in. "Let's skip the small talk. We're here to discuss Olivia's medical needs and how they're going to be addressed." Dad bristled at the directive. "Dad, with all due respect, this is between us and Olivia." "No," Grandpa replied evenly. "It stopped being just between you when you abdicated your parental responsibility to ensure your child's health and well-being." The tension in the room thickened. I'd never heard Grandpa speak to my father this way, with such barely contained anger. A knock at the door interrupted the standoff. Dr. Mercer entered, carrying my chart and looking professionally neutral despite the obvious tension. "Good morning," he greeted everyone. "I understand we're having a family conference about Olivia's treatment plan." "Yes," Grandpa Samuel took charge immediately. "Doctor, could you please explain once more, for everyone's benefit, exactly what Olivia's medical situation is and what treatment she requires?" Dr. Mercer nodded and proceeded to outline my condition in clear, unambiguous terms, the extent of the damage, the necessity of surgical intervention, the consequences of further delay, and the expected outcomes with proper treatment. "And the approximate cost?" Grandpa prompted when the doctor finished. "With insurance, the patient responsibility would be approximately $45,000, covering the surgery itself, hospital stay, anesthesia, and initial physical therapy." "Thank you, doctor," Grandpa said. "Now, one more question. In your professional opinion, is this surgery medically necessary, or is it elective?" "It is absolutely medically necessary," Dr. Mercer stated without hesitation. "Without this surgery, Olivia faces a future of chronic pain, progressive mobility limitations, and probable disability." Grandpa nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "Thank you for your clarity. I have just one more request. Could you give us some privacy for a family discussion? We'll call if we need anything further." Once Dr. Mercer left, Grandpa turned to my parents, his expression hardening. "I'm paying for the surgery." Dad started to protest, but Grandpa held up a hand, silencing him. I'm not finished. I'm paying for it because apparently my son and daughter-in-law believe a luxury car for their younger daughter is more important than necessary medical care for their older daughter. That's not fair, Mom objected weakly. Isn't it? Grandpa challenged. Tell me, Diana, how much do you and Robert have in your savings account right now? My parents exchanged alarmed glances. That's private information, Dad said stiffly. Not anymore, Grandpa replied. Not when you're claiming financial hardship as a reason to deny your daughter necessary medical care. We never said we were experiencing hardship, Dad protested. No? Then what would you call it when you tell Olivia you can't afford her $45,000 surgery, but then spend $65,000 on a car for Madison the very next month? Silence filled the room. How did you know how much we have in savings? Mom finally asked, her voice small. Grandpa's expression was unyielding. I called your financial advisor this morning. You had no right. Dad exclaimed. No right. Grandpa's voice rose slightly. I have every right when it comes to protecting my granddaughter. Martin has been my friend for 30 years. When I explained the situation, he was as appalled as I am. He turned to me. Your parents currently have $182,000 in their main savings account. They have another $75,000 in a separate account earmarked specifically for Madison's future wedding. They could have paid for your surgery 3 times over without touching their retirement funds or investments. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't that they couldn't afford my surgery. They simply didn't want to pay for it. Is that true? I asked, looking directly at my father. He couldn't meet my eyes. It's more complicated than that. How? I demanded. How is it complicated? You have the money. You chose not to use it for my medical care. What am I missing? Mom stepped forward, wringing her hands. We've been saving for Madison's wedding since she was a little girl. She's always dreamed of a big wedding and we promised. And what about my dreams? I cut in. What about my promise to myself that I'd work hard, get an education, build a life? How am I supposed to do that when I can barely walk? We thought you'd figure something out, Dad said lamely. You've always been so resourceful, so independent. Independent doesn't mean abandoned, Grandpa snapped. It doesn't mean left to suffer when help is available but withheld. He turned back to my parents, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. I'm ashamed of you both. Truly ashamed. I thought I raised you better than this, Robert. Dad flinched as if he'd been struck. The surgery is happening, Grandpa continued. I've already spoken with the hospital's financial department. It's scheduled for tomorrow morning. I'm covering all costs, and I'm staying with Olivia throughout her recovery. We can help, Mom offered weakly. We want to help. Now you want to help? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. After Grandpa calls you out? After I collapse in public? What changed, Mom? The money was always there. She had no answer. I think you both should leave, Grandpa said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Dad drew himself up, a flash of the stubborn pride I'd inherited despite myself. You don't get to dismiss us from our daughter's hospital room. Actually, I interjected, I want you to leave too. I can't. I can't look at either of you right now without seeing Madison's BMW instead of my surgery. The hurt on their faces might have moved me once, but I was beyond that now. The pain medication was wearing off, and with its fading came a clarity that felt almost cruel in its sharpness. They left without further argument, Mom pausing at the door to look back with tears in her eyes. I turned my face away. When they were gone, Grandpa Samuel sat heavily in the chair beside my bed, suddenly looking every one of his 73 years. I should have known, he said quietly. I should have seen this coming. How could you have? I reached for his hand. I didn't tell you how bad it was. Because you shouldn't have had to, he replied, squeezing my fingers. This should never have happened, Livy. Never. In that moment, with my grandfather's hand warm around mine and the promise of help finally real, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since the car reveal, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from someplace I'd locked away long ago. Grandpa simply held my hand and let me cry, understanding that some wounds needed to bleed before they could begin to heal. The morning of the surgery arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Perhaps it was the certainty that help was finally here, or maybe it was the knowledge that regardless of what happened with my family, I wouldn't face it alone. Grandpa Samuel was there early, having spent the night in the hospital despite my insistence that he go to a hotel. He'd simply settled into the recliner in my room and waved away my concerns. "I've slept in worse places," he said, including a foxhole in Korea. "This chair is practically luxurious by comparison." The pre-surgical team came in to prepare me, checking vitals and explaining procedures. Dr. Mercer stopped by to review the surgical plan once more. "We'll reconstruct the ACL using a graft from your patellar tendon," he explained. "We'll also repair the meniscus damage and address the tibial plateau fracture with internal fixation. It's a complex procedure, but I'm confident we can achieve a good outcome." As they were about to wheel me to the operating room, my parents appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain. "Can we come in?" Mom asked tentatively. I glanced at Grandpa, who gave me a small nod. "Your choice, Livy." "Okay," I said after a moment. "But just for a minute. I'm heading to surgery soon." They entered cautiously, as if approaching a wounded animal that might either flee or attack. "We wanted to wish you good luck," Dad said stiffly. "And to say we're sorry." The apology hung in the air, insufficient but sincere. "We brought you something," Mom added, holding out a small gift bag. I took it reluctantly, peering inside to find a framed photo of me at my high school graduation, standing between my parents, all of us smiling. Before the injury, before everything changed. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You don't have to say anything," Mom replied. We want you to know we're trying to understand what we did wrong." It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was something. A crack in the wall of denial they'd built around their favoritism. "Thank you for coming," I said, neither accepting nor rejecting their tentative olive branch. The transport team arrived then, ready to take me to surgery. There was an awkward moment as my parents stepped back, clearly wanting to offer some physical gesture of support, but unsure if it would be welcome. Grandpa solved the dilemma by stepping forward and kissing my forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up, kiddo. Everything's going to be okay now." I believed him. The surgery lasted nearly 4 hours. I remember nothing of it, of course, just the countdown from the anesthesiologist and then waking in the recovery room with a massive brace on my leg and a fog in my brain that made thinking feel like wading through molasses. True to his word, Grandpa Samuel was there when I fully regained consciousness in my hospital room. So were my parents, sitting quietly in the corner, and, surprisingly, Taylor, who must have driven back from campus. "Welcome back to the land of the living," Grandpa said warmly. "Dr. Mercer says the surgery went well. Better than expected, in fact." Taylor moved to my bedside, squeezing my hand. "You had us worried for a bit there. Your blood pressure dropped during the procedure, but they got it stabilized." "Sorry," I mumbled, still groggy. "Don't you dare apologize," Taylor scolded gently. "Just focus on getting better." The recovery process was grueling. 3 days in the hospital, followed by a week at Grandpa's house before I could return to my apartment near campus. Physical therapy began almost immediately, painful exercises designed to rebuild strength and mobility in my reconstructed knee. Grandpa was my rock throughout, driving me to appointments, making sure I took medications on schedule, and encouraging me when the pain made me want to quit. My parents hovered on the periphery, uncertain of their place in this new dynamic. They called daily, visited occasionally, always careful not to overstep. Their remorse seemed genuine, but the damage done wasn't something that could be erased with a few weeks of attentive behavior. The most surprising development came 3 weeks post-surgery, when Madison appeared at my apartment door unannounced. "Can I come in?" she asked, none of her usual confidence in evidence. I stepped back, leaning heavily on my crutches, and gestured for her to enter. She looked different somehow. Her designer clothes were replaced by simple jeans and a sweatshirt, and her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Most noticeably, she'd arrived in an older model Honda, not the BMW. "I sold it," she said, following my glance out the window. "The car? What? Why?" Madison sat on the edge of my couch, hands twisting nervously in her lap. "After what happened at the hospital, after what Grandpa said to Mom and Dad, I couldn't keep it. It didn't feel right." I lowered myself carefully into an armchair, elevating my leg as the physical therapist had instructed. "I didn't ask you to sell your car, Madison." "I know you didn't," she replied quietly. "That's part of why I did it. You never ask for anything, Olivia. You never have. And I've always asked for everything." The admission stunned me into silence. "I knew," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the surgery, about Mom and Dad refusing to pay for it. I heard them talking about it the night before they told you no. And you still asked for the BMW?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I convinced myself it was different, that a car was a necessity and the surgery was optional. But I knew. Deep down, I knew it was wrong. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to know that I see it now. The way they've always favored me, given me everything while expecting you to fend for yourself. It wasn't fair, and I was complicit in it." The honesty was unexpected and disarming. For years, I'd seen Madison as spoiled and self-centered, unaware of or unconcerned with the disparities in our treatment. The realization that she had been aware, that she'd chosen to ignore it for her own benefit, should have angered me. Instead, it sparked a strange sense of relief. At least now everything was in the open. "What did you do with the money from the car?" I asked. "I put most of it toward tuition. The rest I'm using to pay for therapy." "Therapy?" She nodded. "Turns out growing up as the golden child messes you up too, just differently. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not being given everything I want." It was the most insightful thing I'd ever heard her say. Our conversation marked a turning point, not just with Madison, but with my parents as well. The facade of familial perfection had been shattered, forcing everyone to confront the unhealthy dynamics that had shaped our lives. Physical therapy continued, painful session after painful session. Some days I felt I was making progress. Other days the pain and frustration seemed insurmountable. But unlike before, I wasn't facing it alone. Grandpa came to every appointment he could. Taylor arranged her schedule to drive me when Grandpa couldn't. Even my parents, in their awkward, uncertain way, tried to help. 6 weeks post-surgery, I was able to put weight on my leg while using a single crutch. 8 weeks in, I walked unassisted for the first time, just across my living room and back, but it felt like crossing a finish line. "Look at you go," Grandpa cheered, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Didn't I tell you you'd beat this thing?" The physical recovery was measurable, trackable through degrees of motion and pain levels. The emotional recovery was messier, less linear. My parents suggested family therapy, a suggestion so unexpected I initially thought I'd misheard. "We've been talking to a counselor," Mom explained during one of their visits. "Separately, I mean. She thinks it might help if we all talked together with a professional mediator." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Why now, after all these years?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Because we nearly lost you. Not physically, but we almost destroyed our relationship with you. And we don't want that." I agreed to try, not entirely convinced it would help, but willing to take the step if they were. The sessions were difficult, often ending with tears or tense silences. Years of resentment and favoritism couldn't be resolved in a few hours of guided conversation. But slowly, painfully, we began to build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. And through it all, my knee healed, growing stronger as I learned to trust my body again, just as I cautiously learned to trust my family in this new, more honest configuration. 6 months after the surgery, I walked across campus without pain for the first time in nearly 2 years. The freedom of movement, something I'd once taken for granted, now felt like a miracle. I could climb stairs without wincing, sit through classes without shifting constantly to alleviate pressure, even join Taylor for short walks around the lake that bordered the eastern edge of campus. I wasn't back to my pre-injury capability. Dr. Mercer had been clear that some limitations would likely be permanent. No more competitive sports, a lifetime of careful maintenance exercises, and probable arthritis in the distant future. But compared to the life of chronic pain and progressive disability I'd been facing, these constraints seemed minor. On a crisp autumn afternoon, I met Grandpa Samuel at our favorite coffee shop, the same one where I'd collapsed half a year earlier. The staff greeted me warmly, several asking about my recovery. "You look good, Livy," Grandpa said as we settled at a corner table with our drinks. "Strong. I feel strong," I admitted. "Not just physically." He nodded, understanding as always. "Adversity reveals character, yours and others. You've learned that lesson earlier than most." "I wanted to thank you again," I said, wrapping my hands around my mug. "Not just for the surgery, but for everything. For seeing me when I felt invisible." Grandpa reached across the table and patted my hand. "You were never invisible to me. From the day you were born, I saw something special in you. A resilience, a determination that reminded me of myself." He took a sip of his coffee, then set the mug down deliberately. "There's something I want to tell you. I've made some changes to my will." "Grandpa, you don't have to." He held up a hand. "Let me finish. This isn't about the money, though that's part of it. It's about protection. I've established a trust for you that your parents cannot access or control. It will provide for your education and any future medical needs related to your injury." I started to protest again, but he continued. "I've done the same for Madison before you ask. But hers is structured differently, with specific conditions to encourage responsibility and independence. The point is, I want you both to be secure, but I don't want either of you to be vulnerable to the kind of situation you faced this past year." The depth of his thoughtfulness moved me deeply. He hadn't just solved the immediate crisis, he'd taken steps to prevent future ones. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing he would understand all that those 2 words encompassed. The family therapy sessions continued, sometimes productive, sometimes frustrating. My parents struggled to acknowledge patterns so deeply ingrained they'd become invisible to them. Madison oscillated between defensive justification and remorseful guilt. I vacillated between anger and the desire to forge a healthier relationship. Progress came in small moments, Dad calling to ask about my physical therapy instead of just assuming I was fine. Mom acknowledging that she'd always expected more from me because you seemed so capable. Madison asking for advice instead of attention. During one particularly difficult session, our therapist, Dr. Levine, asked us each to express what we wanted from our family relationships moving forward. "Boundaries," I said without hesitation. "Respect for my independence, but support when I actually ask for it. And equality, not just in material things, but in expectations and attention." "That seems reasonable," Dr. Levine observed. "Robert, Diana, how do you respond to that?" My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "It's fair," Dad finally said. "More than fair, considering everything. We haven't been equitable parents, and we need to do better." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "I want a relationship with both my daughters. Real relationships, not based on roles we've assigned or expectations we've created." Madison's answer surprised me most. "I want us to be honest with each other. Even when it's hard. Maybe especially then." Setting boundaries wasn't easy. There were missteps and backsliding, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. But the difference now was that we recognized them when they happened, named them, and tried to correct course. One unexpected outcome of my experience was the creation of a support group for students dealing with family favoritism and its effects. What began as casual conversations with classmates who'd experienced similar dynamics grew into weekly meetings in the student union building. 20 students at first, then 30, then more. I never realized how common it was, I told Taylor after one particularly emotional session. So many people carrying these invisible wounds. And now they have somewhere to talk about it, she pointed out. You did that, Liv. You turned your pain into something helpful for others. The perspective shift was profound. For so long, I'd seen myself as a victim of my family's dysfunction. Now I was using that experience to help others navigate their own complex family relationships. Even Madison attended occasionally, offering the rare and valuable perspective of the favored child who was working to understand the damage that preference had caused. I think about all the times I took advantage, she admitted during one meeting. All the times I knew what I was asking for wasn't fair to my sister, but I asked anyway because I knew I'd get it. That's on me, not just my parents. Her honesty earned her respect from the group and from me. Our relationship, once defined by resentment and competition, was evolving into something more balanced, more authentic. My parents sold their house that fall, downsizing to a smaller home closer to Grandpa. The decision surprised me until Mom explained their reasoning. We don't need all that space anymore, and the equity will help us fix some of our financial priorities, she said. We've been thinking a lot about what really matters. What went unsaid but understood was that the house had been part of the problem, a showcase for success rather than a home built on love and equity. As winter approached, bringing with it the one-year anniversary of the confrontation over Madison's car, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. The physical pain that had dominated my existence was now manageable, flaring occasionally but no longer constant. The emotional pain had transformed too, not gone but different, more like a healing scar than an open wound. I'd learned lessons I never wanted to learn. That family can hurt you in ways strangers never could, that love is not always expressed equally or fairly, that sometimes you have to fight for what should be freely given. But I'd also learned that it's possible to rebuild what's broken, that people can change when confronted with the consequences of their actions, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, but can exist alongside clear boundaries and new expectations. Most importantly, I'd discovered my own worth wasn't determined by my parents' validation or recognition. It existed independently, recognized by those who truly saw me, Grandpa Samuel, Taylor, the students in my support group who drew strength from my story. On a snowy December evening, I sat in Grandpa's living room, watching him tend the fire while my parents and Madison helped prepare dinner in the kitchen. The scene was ordinary, domestic, yet it represented an extraordinary transformation from where we'd been a year ago. "Penny for your thoughts," Grandpa said, noticing my contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," I replied. "And how much hasn't?" He nodded, understanding as always. "The people are the same, but the awareness is different. That's where healing begins." "Do you think we'll ever be completely healed?" "As a family, I mean." Grandpa considered the question carefully before answering. "I think healing isn't a destination, Livy. It's a practice. Some days you'll do it well, some days you won't. The important thing is that you keep trying." As we gathered around the table that evening, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years, I realized he was right. We weren't a perfect family. We probably never would be. But we were learning to see each other clearly, to acknowledge hurts rather than ignore them, to make space for truth alongside love. And perhaps that's the most any family can aspire to, not perfection, but authenticity. Not flawlessness, but the courage to face our flaws and grow beyond them. My knee will always bear the scars of what happened, just as our family will always carry the history of favoritism and neglect. But scars are not just markers of past wounds. They're evidence of survival, of healing, of the body's remarkable capacity to repair itself. The same is true for the heart, for relationships, for families willing to do the difficult work of honest reckoning and genuine change. As I look toward the future now, I do so with neither resentment nor rose-colored optimism, but with a clear-eyed understanding that we build our lives one choice at a time, one conversation at a time, one boundary at a time. And in that building, we define for ourselves what family truly means. Have you ever experienced family favoritism or had to stand up for yourself when those who should support you didn't? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your worth. Remember, sometimes the family we create through our choices is as important as the one we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own path to healing. My name is Ashley. I'm 27 years old, and I almost died from a shellfish allergy when I was 7. You'd think after 20 years, my own family would remember something that nearly killed me, right? Wrong. Last Thanksgiving, my mother Amanda looked me straight in the eye and announced they were serving shrimp as the main course. I've been allergic my entire life. That's when I realized my family cared more about their dinner plans than my actual survival. So I walked out and took every single bag of groceries I'd brought with me. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from and if you or anyone you know has dealt with food allergies that family members just don't take seriously. Hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, and don't forget to subscribe because trust me, this story gets wild. I was genuinely excited about this trip home to Cleveland. After 6 months of working remotely from my tiny Seattle apartment, I couldn't wait to see my childhood home again. The autumn leaves were perfect, painting the suburban streets in brilliant oranges and reds that reminded me why I'd always loved fall in Ohio. David, my boyfriend of 8 months, was driving while I navigated from the passenger seat. He'd been incredibly supportive when I'd made the leap from my corporate marketing job to freelance graphic design. While my income was still unpredictable, he never made me feel bad about splitting dinner bills or staying in for movie nights instead of expensive dates. His calm, steady presence had become my anchor during all the uncertainty of building my own business. "Tell me again about your family," David said, glancing over at me with that gentle smile that made my heart skip. "I want to make sure I don't accidentally say something wrong." I launched into stories about growing up in our beautiful colonial house with its wraparound porch and massive oak tree in the backyard. I told him about family game nights where we'd stay up until midnight playing Monopoly and how my mother Amanda used to make special allergy-friendly versions of every holiday dish just for me. She'd been so careful, reading every label, calling manufacturers to double-check ingredients. When other kids' parents sent birthday cupcakes to school, Amanda would pack me special treats so I never felt left out. My sister Emily had always been my closest confidant. Even though she was 3 years younger, she'd appointed herself my protector whenever kids at school made fun of my packed lunches or the EpiPen I carried everywhere. Emily would march right up to anyone who called me allergy girl and give them a piece of her mind that left them speechless. "Your family sounds amazing," David said, squeezing my hand. "I can see where you get your kindness from." The back seat and trunk were loaded with groceries I'd carefully selected from Whole Foods that morning. Organic free-range turkey, artisanal cranberry sauce, heirloom vegetables, and a decadent pumpkin pie from the bakery that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. I wanted to contribute something special, to show my family that my new life wasn't just about chasing dreams, but about bringing beautiful things to the people I loved. Emily and I had been texting for weeks about the dinner plans. She was handling the decorations while Amanda coordinated the menu. Dad had promised to break out his famous homemade rolls, the ones that took him 2 days to perfect, but melted in your mouth like clouds of butter and wheat. Even thinking about them made my mouth water. This was going to be David's first real introduction to my family, and I wanted everything to be perfect. I'd told him story after story about our traditions, about how we'd watch the Thanksgiving Day parade while Amanda bustled around the kitchen, how we'd all take turns saying what we were grateful for before digging into the feast. I wanted him to understand that despite choosing to live across the country, Family was still the foundation of everything I valued. I can't wait for you to taste my dad's stuffing, I said, practically bouncing in my seat. And wait until you see how my mom decorates. She goes all out with these gorgeous autumn centerpieces that look like they belong in a magazine. David chuckled at my enthusiasm. You're really glowing right now. I love seeing you this happy. I was happy. For the first time in months, everything felt like it was falling into place. My design business was starting to gain traction. I had this wonderful man beside me who supported my dreams, and I was about to share one of my favorite holidays with the people who mattered most. The 6-hour drive had flown by because I spent most of it painting pictures of the warm, loving family dinner waiting for us. As we pulled into the familiar driveway, I felt that rush of nostalgia that comes from returning to the place where you learned what love was supposed to feel like. The front door opened before we'd even finished unloading the car, and Amanda appeared with her arms outstretched for a hug. She looked exactly the same as always, her silver hair perfectly styled and her autumn-themed sweater coordinated with orange jewelry that caught the late afternoon light. "Ashley, honey," she called out, but her embrace felt rushed, distracted. Over her shoulder, I could see her phone buzzing on the hall table, and her eyes kept darting toward it even as she squeezed me. "Mom, this is David," I said, stepping back to make introductions. "David, my mother Amanda." "Mrs. Patterson, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you," David said, extending his hand with that warm, genuine smile that had won over my friends and coworkers back in Seattle. "Ashley talks about you constantly." Amanda shook his hand politely but barely made eye contact. "Nice to meet you too, Derek." "Actually, it's David," he corrected gently, still smiling. "Of course, sorry. I'm just so scattered today with all the cooking." But she was already turning away, reaching for her phone. "Ashley, honey, you can put your things in the guest room. I've made some changes to your old room." I felt the first little prick of disappointment. Amanda had always been meticulous about names and details. She prided herself on remembering everything about everyone, from birthdays to favorite colors to how people liked their coffee. Getting David's name wrong felt strange, but I pushed the feeling aside. We hauled in bag after bag of groceries, and I was excited to show off the beautiful ingredients I'd selected. But as we passed through the kitchen, I noticed the counters were already crowded with unfamiliar packages and containers. The air was thick with a smell that made my stomach turn, a distinctive briny scent that I recognized but didn't want to acknowledge. "Wow, you've really outdone yourself this year," I said, trying to keep my tone light as I set down the organic vegetables. "It smells like you've been cooking all day." Emily appeared in the doorway, and I rushed over to hug my little sister. But she felt tense in my arms, and when I pulled back, her smile seemed forced. "Hey, Ash. How was the drive?" She glanced nervously between me and Amanda, who was now absorbed in her phone again. "Long but good. David's been such a trooper." I brought all your favorite things for tomorrow." I gestured toward the grocery bags. "Remember that cranberry orange bread you loved when we visited that cafe in Chicago? I found the exact recipe online and got all the ingredients." "That's sweet," Emily said, but she didn't sound excited. We might need to talk about the menu. There have been some changes." Dad chose that moment to come thundering down the stairs, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence long before he appeared. James Patterson had always been a larger-than-life personality, the kind of man who filled every room he entered with his booming voice and strong opinions. Well, look who finally decided to visit," he said, and while his tone was jovial, there was an edge underneath that I'd never heard directed at me before. "And she brought a friend." "Dad, this is David, my boyfriend." "David, my father James." David stepped forward confidently, offering his hand. "Mr. Patterson, Ashley's told me so much about you. I understand you're quite the bread maker." Dad shook his hand, but his grip looked unnecessarily firm, and his smile was more like a challenge. "She's told you about me, has she? I wonder what version of the story you got." Probably the one where we're supposed to be impressed that she's finally bringing someone home after running off to play artist in Seattle. The words hit me like a slap. Dad had always been my biggest cheerleader, the one who encouraged me to follow my dreams even when they seemed impossible. Hearing him dismiss my career as playing artist felt like the ground shifting beneath my feet. "James," Amanda said without looking up from her phone, "be nice." "I am being nice. I'm just curious about this young man who's apparently important enough to drag our daughter across the country for." He looked David up and down appraisingly. "What do you do for work, son?" "I'm a software engineer at a tech startup," David replied, his voice steady despite the obvious hostility. "I actually think what Ashley's building with her design business is incredibly impressive. Her talent is remarkable." "Design business," Dad repeated with a snort. "Is that what we're calling it?" I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "Dad, what's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, sweetheart. I'm sure your little hobby is very fulfilling." The word hobby hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I'd been building my client base steadily, working 12-hour days to establish myself in a competitive field. I'd just landed my biggest contract yet, designing branding for a sustainable fashion startup. It wasn't a hobby, it was my career, my passion, my future. David moved slightly closer to me, a subtle show of support that I appreciated more than he could know. But I could see the confusion in his eyes. This wasn't the warm, loving family I'd described during our long drive. "Where should we put Ashley's groceries?" David asked, clearly trying to change the subject. "She brought some beautiful ingredients to contribute to tomorrow's dinner." Amanda finally looked up from her phone, glancing at the bags with what looked almost like annoyance. "Oh, you didn't need to bring anything. I've got everything handled." "But I wanted to contribute," I said. "I got that organic turkey we talked about, and the cranberries from that farm in Washington that Emily said she wanted to try." "We're not really doing traditional this year," Amanda said dismissively. "I've planned something different. More sophisticated." Emily shot me another one of those worried looks, and suddenly I felt like an outsider in my own childhood home. The excitement I'd felt during the car ride was rapidly deflating, replaced by a growing sense that I'd somehow missed an important memo about how this visit was supposed to go. "Let me show you to the guest room," Emily said quickly, grabbing one of our suitcases. "You must be tired from the drive." As we climbed the familiar stairs, I noticed the framed photos that had lined the walls for years. Pictures of family vacations, school achievements, holidays together. But as we passed, I realized something was missing. The photos were still there, but many of them seemed to be from before I'd moved to Seattle. Recent pictures, the ones I'd sent of my new apartment, my art shows, my adventures exploring the Pacific Northwest, were nowhere to be seen. "Here's your room," Emily said, opening the door to what used to be the guest room, but was now clearly a permanent living space. "I hope you'll be comfortable." "What about my old room?" I asked, even though I already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Emily winced. "Mom's turned it into her craft room. She's really gotten into scrapbooking and jewelry making. She needed the space for all her supplies." My childhood bedroom, with its pale yellow walls and the window seat where I'd spent countless hours reading, had been erased. Replaced by Amanda's new hobbies, as if 20 years of my life in that house had been neatly packaged away to make room for more important things. David set down our bags and immediately wrapped his arms around me from behind, sensing my distress. "The room is lovely," he said to Emily, though I could hear the careful diplomacy in his voice. "Thank you for accommodating us." As Emily left us alone to settle in, I sank onto the guest bed and finally let myself acknowledge what I'd been trying to ignore. Something was very wrong here, and the family dinner I'd been anticipating for months was already starting to feel like a mistake. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of voices drifting up from the kitchen. David was still sleeping, his arm draped protectively across my waist, and for a moment I just listened to the familiar rhythm of my family preparing for a big meal. It almost felt normal, like the strange tension from yesterday had been my imagination. But as I crept downstairs in my pajamas, hoping to help with breakfast and recapture some of that old closeness with Amanda, I caught fragments of conversation that made me freeze on the bottom step. She just waltzed in here with all those fancy groceries, like she's showing off, Amanda was saying to someone on the phone. As if we don't know how to cook a proper meal without her expensive ingredients. Who's she talking to? I wondered, but then Emily's voice answered my unspoken question. Mom, that's not fair. Ashley was just trying to contribute. You know how she is about wanting to help. Help? Amanda laughed, but it wasn't a warm sound. Emily, sweetie, your sister stopped wanting to help this family the day she decided we weren't good enough for her anymore. Running off to Seattle, like she couldn't wait to get away from us. The words felt like ice water in my veins. I pressed myself against the wall, knowing I shouldn't eavesdrop, but unable to move. That's not why she moved, Emily protested. She got that job opportunity, and then she wanted to try freelancing. It's not about us, isn't it? Dad's voice joined the conversation. 27 years old, and she's still playing dress-up, calling herself an entrepreneur. Meanwhile, she drags home some stranger and expects us to pretend he's family. David seems nice, Emily said weakly. David seems like he's humoring her, Amanda replied. Mark my words, once he realizes what she's really like, how selfish and dramatic she can be, he'll be gone faster than you can say Seattle. I had to grip the banister to keep from stumbling. Selfish? Dramatic? These were words I'd never heard associated with myself, especially not from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Remember when she was little and used to fake those stomachaches to get out of family events? Dad continued. Always had to be the center of attention, always had some crisis that meant the world had to revolve around her. The allergies aren't fake, Emily said firmly, and I felt a rush of gratitude for my sister's defense. Of course they're not fake, Amanda said impatiently. But the way she milks them for sympathy makes everyone walk on eggshells around her. Do you know how exhausting it's been, having to plan every meal around Ashley's restrictions for 20 years? My throat closed up. Every carefully planned family dinner, every time Amanda had called restaurants ahead of time to check ingredients, every special dish she'd made just for me. I'd thought it was love. She'd made it feel like love. But apparently, it had been a burden all along. I think we should tell her, Emily said quietly. About Connor coming tonight. Connor. My ex-boyfriend from college. We'd dated for 2 years before I'd realized we wanted completely different things from life. He'd wanted marriage, kids, and a traditional suburban existence by the time we were 25. I'd wanted to explore the world, build a career, figure out who I was outside of other people's expectations. We'd broken up amicably when I'd moved to Seattle, promising to stay friends, but gradually losing touch as our lives took different directions. Why would Connor be coming to Thanksgiving dinner? I whispered to myself. It'll be good for her to see what she gave up, Amanda was saying. Connor's doing so well now. He's got that promotion at the bank, bought that beautiful house in Westlake. He's ready to settle down with the right kind of woman. Mom, Ashley has a boyfriend. She brought him here to meet us. That Seattle boy? Please. Ashley's going through a phase, Emily. She always has. First it was that theater obsession in high school, then the art classes in college, now this design fantasy. She'll come back to reality eventually, and when she does, she'll need good people like Connor waiting for her. I felt like I was drowning. My family hadn't just dismissed my career and my relationship. They'd apparently been planning some kind of intervention disguised as a holiday dinner. The groceries I'd brought, the excitement I'd felt about sharing my new life with them, David's nervous preparation to make a good impression. None of it mattered because they'd already decided my life was a mistake that needed correcting. Besides, Dad added, Connor's family has always been good to us. His father helped me with that legal issue last year, remember? It's the least we can do to include him in our family gathering. Legal issue? I didn't know anything about Dad needing legal help. How much had I missed by living across the country? How many family crises had they navigated without even mentioning them to me? "What are we serving for dinner?" Emily asked, and I held my breath for the answer. "I planned something special," Amanda said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. "Lobster tails and jumbo shrimp with that garlic butter sauce Connor loves." I know it's not traditional, but I wanted to do something elegant. Something that shows we've evolved beyond boring turkey dinners. The bottom dropped out of my world. Shellfish. She was planning to serve shellfish as the main course of our family Thanksgiving dinner. The same shellfish that had sent me to the emergency room when I was 7, that I carried an EpiPen for, that had shaped 20 years of careful meal planning and ingredient checking. Emily's voice was sharp with alarm. "Mom, you can't serve shellfish. Ashley's allergic, remember? She could die." "Oh, Emily, don't be so dramatic. Ashley can eat the side dishes. There will be plenty for her to choose from. She's not going to die from being in the same room as shrimp." But that wasn't true. My allergy was severe enough that sometimes even the smell or airborne particles could trigger a reaction. Amanda knew this. She'd been the one holding my hand in the hospital all those years ago, watching me struggle to breathe while doctors pumped me full of epinephrine and antihistamines. "This is insane," Emily said, her voice rising. "You're planning a dinner that could literally kill your daughter, and you're talking about it like she's being picky about vegetables." "Your sister has made her choices," Dad said coldly. "She chose to move across the country. She chose to abandon her family for some fantasy life. She chose to bring a stranger to our family dinner. Maybe it's time she learned that choices have consequences." I couldn't listen anymore. My legs were shaking as I crept back upstairs, my heart pounding so hard I was sure David would wake up. But he was still sleeping peacefully, unaware that the family he'd driven 6 hours to meet had spent the morning discussing how to teach me a lesson about loyalty and life choices. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands and trying to process what I'd just heard. My family didn't just disapprove of my life, they actively resented it. They saw my career as a joke, my relationship as temporary, and my allergies as an inconvenience they'd endured long enough. The dinner wasn't a celebration of family, it was an ambush designed to force me back into a life I'd never wanted. And the worst part was, I'd walked right into it, carrying bags of groceries like an offering to people who saw my love as a burden they couldn't wait to be rid of. By 4 o'clock, the house was filled with the sounds and smells of dinner preparation, but my stomach was churning with anxiety rather than hunger. David had spent the afternoon trying to engage with my family, offering to help in the kitchen, asking Dad about his work, complimenting Amanda on her decorations. But every attempt at connection was met with polite disinterest at best, barely concealed hostility at worst. I'd managed to pull Emily aside and ask her directly about Connor, hoping she'd tell me it was all a misunderstanding. Instead, she'd confirmed my worst fears with an apologetic whisper. "Mom invited him last week. She said it would be good for the family to reconnect with him, and that maybe seeing him would help you remember what you're missing back home." Emily's eyes were filled with guilt and worry. "I tried to talk her out of it, Ash. I really did, but you know how she gets when she's made up her mind about something." "And the shellfish?" I'd asked, though I already knew the answer. "She insists you're being overdramatic about the allergy. She thinks you use it to control family gatherings and get attention." Emily's voice was barely audible. "I've tried explaining how serious it is, but she just gets angry and says I'm enabling you." Now, as I sat in the living room pretending to watch football with David and Dad, I felt like I was waiting for an execution. The smell of cooking seafood was getting stronger, and I could already feel the tightness in my chest that usually preceded a reaction. I'd taken 2 antihistamines preemptively, but I knew they wouldn't be enough if I was exposed to shellfish directly. "Ashley, honey, could you come help me in the kitchen for a minute?" Amanda called out, her voice sweet as pie. David squeezed my hand encouragingly. "Want me to come with you?" "No, it's fine," I lied, not wanting him to witness whatever confrontation was brewing. I found Amanda standing over the stove, stirring a large pot of what looked like melted butter mixed with garlic and herbs. The lobster tails were arranged on a baking sheet, their shells bright red and glistening. Jumbo shrimp were piled on another platter, and the smell was overwhelming even from across the room. "What do you think?" she asked proudly, gesturing at her seafood feast. "Isn't it gorgeous? Much more sophisticated than the same old turkey and stuffing." "Mom," I said carefully, "you know I can't eat any of this, right?" "The shellfish allergy." "Oh, Ashley, stop being so dramatic." She waved a butter-covered spoon dismissively. "You can fill up on the side dishes. I made plenty of options for you. It's not about having other options. I can't even be in the same room when this is being served. The smell alone is starting to affect me." My voice was getting tighter, and I could feel my throat beginning to constrict slightly. Amanda turned to face me fully, and for the first time all weekend, I had her complete attention. But the look in her eyes wasn't concern, it was irritation. "Ashley Marie, I have spent 20 years tiptoeing around your allergies. 20 years of reading every label, calling every restaurant, making special dishes just for you. I am tired of planning my life around your restrictions." The formal use of my middle name sent chills down my spine. Amanda only did that when she was truly angry, when she'd reached the end of her patience and was about to deliver a verdict I wouldn't like. "This isn't about restrictions," I said, my breathing becoming more labored. "This is about my safety. About not dying at the dinner table." "You're not going to die from being dramatic," she snapped. "You know what I think? I think you've been milking this allergy for sympathy your entire life. Poor Ashley, who can't eat the same food as everyone else. Poor Ashley, who needs special treatment and constant attention." The words hit me like physical blows. "Milking it? Mom, I almost died when I was 7. You were there. You saw what happened." I saw a scared little girl who learned that having a medical crisis meant everyone would stop what they were doing and focus on her. And I've watched you use that lesson ever since. That's when I heard the front door open, followed by a familiar laugh that made my blood run cold. Connor's voice carried into the kitchen as Dad greeted him warmly, welcoming him like a member of the family. "Surprise," Amanda said brightly, as if she hadn't just accused me of faking a life-threatening medical condition. "I invited Connor to join us. I thought it would be lovely to have him back at our family table." Connor appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking exactly like the successful banker my family apparently thought I should have married. His suit was perfectly tailored, his smile confident, and his eyes held a mixture of sympathy and superiority that made me want to scream. "Ashley," he said warmly, moving in for a hug I desperately didn't want. "You look different. Seattle must be treating you well." I stepped back before he could embrace me, very aware that David was probably wondering why another man was hugging his girlfriend in her childhood kitchen. "Connor, this is unexpected. Your mom thought it would be nice for us to catch up. I've been worried about you, honestly. This whole freelance thing sounds so unstable. So risky." He glanced around the kitchen, taking in the seafood preparation. "I hope you've outgrown that allergy drama. This looks incredible, Mrs. Patterson." Allergy drama. As if my medical condition was a personality flaw I should have overcome by now. "Actually, I haven't outgrown anything," I said firmly. "And I need to go take my emergency medication because the shellfish smell is already affecting me." "Ashley," Amanda said in that warning tone I remembered from childhood, "do not make a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I'm trying not to have an allergic reaction." "We're serving shrimp and lobster as the main course," Amanda announced, as if she was sharing wonderful news. "It's time this family stopped arranging our lives around your limitations." The room went completely silent. Connor looked uncomfortable for the first time since he'd arrived. Even he understood that what Amanda had just said was beyond the pale. "You're serving the one food that could kill me," I said slowly, on purpose. "I'm serving a beautiful dinner that normal people can enjoy," she replied coldly. "If you choose to make it about your medical issues, that's your decision." That's when David appeared in the doorway, having clearly sensed something was wrong. He took one look at my face, which was probably flushed and panicked, and immediately moved to my side. Ashley, are you okay? You look like you're having trouble breathing. We need to go, I said quietly. Right now. Go. Amanda's voice rose to a shriek. Ashley, we're about to serve dinner. Connor drove all the way here to see you. The family is finally together. The family that planned a dinner designed to poison me? I turned to Connor, who was studying his shoes. Did you know about this? About the shellfish. His silence was answer enough. Oh my God, I breathed. You all planned this together. This isn't a family dinner. This is some kind of intervention where you try to force me back into the life you think I should be living. Ashley, Dad said, appearing behind Connor, you're being hysterical. I'm being hysterical because my family is trying to kill me. My voice cracked on the last word, and I could feel tears of rage and betrayal burning behind my eyes. Emily rushed into the kitchen, took one look at the scene, and immediately understood what was happening. Mom, this is insane. Ashley's right to be upset. Stay out of this, Emily, Amanda warned. This is between Ashley and reality. David stepped forward, his voice calm but ice cold. I'm sorry, but did you just say you're serving food that you know could cause your daughter to have a life-threatening allergic reaction? I said we're serving a normal dinner and Ashley can choose whether or not to make it about her problems, Amanda replied haughtily. Her problems? David's composure cracked slightly. You mean her potentially fatal medical condition that you're deliberately triggering? And who are you exactly? Dad demanded. You've been dating our daughter for what, 5 minutes? Don't lecture us about family dynamics you don't understand. That's when Connor decided to add his unwanted opinion. Ashley's always been prone to exaggeration. I'm sure she can manage one dinner without making everything about her allergies. David turned to stare at Connor like he'd grown a second head. I'm sorry, who are you and why are you commenting on my girlfriend's medical condition? I'm someone who actually knows Ashley, Connor replied smugly. Someone who was there before she decided to run off and play artist in Seattle. The contempt in his voice when he said play artist was the final straw. Something inside me snapped, and suddenly I wasn't the scared, confused daughter who'd been trying to make sense of my family's behavior. I was a grown woman who'd built a life I was proud of, who deserved basic respect and consideration, who refused to be treated like a burden or a problem to be solved. You know what? I said, my voice suddenly steady and clear. You're absolutely right. I do have a choice here. And I choose not to stay in a house where my own family has planned a dinner that could kill me just to prove some point about my life choices. Ashley, Amanda started, but I held up my hand. No. I'm done. David, we're leaving. Right now. Where do you think you're going? Dad demanded. Anywhere but here, I replied, and for the first time all weekend, I felt completely sure of myself. If you walk out that door, Amanda said, her voice shaking with rage, don't expect to be welcomed back. I looked around the kitchen one more time, at the family I'd driven 6 hours to see, at the man they'd brought to replace my boyfriend, at the dinner that could have sent me to the hospital. And I realized that walking away wasn't a loss. It was the first smart decision I'd made all weekend. I wouldn't dream of coming back, I said. The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. Amanda's face had gone pale, clearly not expecting me to call her bluff. Dad looked thunderstruck, as if the possibility of me actually leaving had never occurred to him. Connor shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing he'd stepped into a family drama that was way more toxic than he'd bargained for. But Emily was nodding, tears streaming down her face. Good for you, Ash, she whispered. Good for you. David, I said, turning to my boyfriend who was watching the whole scene with barely concealed shock. Could you please start loading our suitcases into the car? Of course, he said immediately, his voice gentle but determined. Whatever you need. As he headed upstairs, I turned back to face my family. 27 years of people-pleasing, of trying to earn love that should have been unconditional, of accepting treatment that I would never tolerate from strangers. All of it crystallized into perfect clarity in that moment. "I want all of you to listen very carefully," I said, my voice steady and calm in a way that surprised even me. Family is supposed to be about love, support, and basic human decency. Family is supposed to be the people who protect you, who celebrate your successes, who catch you when you fall. "Ashley," Dad started, but I wasn't finished. "Family is not supposed to deliberately endanger your health to prove a point. Family is not supposed to dismiss your career and your dreams as hobbies and phases. Family is not supposed to invite your ex-boyfriend to ambush you at what's supposed to be a celebration of gratitude." I moved toward the counter where my expensive groceries were still sitting in their Whole Foods bags, completely untouched and clearly unwanted. "For 20 years, you made me believe that accommodating my allergies was an act of love. Now I find out it was just a burden you resented carrying. Well, congratulations. You don't have to carry it anymore." I started gathering the grocery bags, and Amanda finally found her voice. "What are you doing?" "Those are for dinner." "No, they're not," I replied calmly, lifting the organic turkey that had cost me $80. "These are groceries that I bought, with my money, from my successful design business that pays my bills and makes me happy. Since you've made it clear that my contributions aren't welcome here, I'm taking them with me." "You can't just take food that was meant for our family dinner," Dad protested. "Watch me," I said, grabbing another bag filled with the heirloom vegetables I'd been so excited to share. "These groceries are going to feed people who actually appreciate my presence and don't think my existence is an inconvenience." Connor cleared his throat awkwardly. "Ashley, maybe we should all just calm down and talk about this rationally." I turned to look at him, this man who dated me for 2 years, but apparently never understood me at all. "Connor, with all due respect, you don't get a vote here. You're not my boyfriend. You're not my family. You're just someone my mother invited to remind me of the life I was smart enough to escape." His face flushed red. "I was trying to help. Your family is worried about you, Ashley. We all care about what happens to you. If you cared about what happens to me, you wouldn't have agreed to participate in a dinner that could send me to the hospital," I shot back. "If you cared about me, you would have respected my decision to move on instead of showing up here like some kind of consolation prize I'm supposed to be grateful for." David reappeared with our luggage, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this man who'd driven 6 hours to meet my family and was now helping me escape from them without a single word of complaint or judgment. "I've got our bags," he said quietly. "The car's ready whenever you are." "I'm almost done," I said, reaching for the artisanal cranberry sauce and the locally sourced honey I'd thought would make such beautiful additions to our family feast. "Ashley Marie Patterson," Amanda said, her voice shaking with fury, "if you take that food and walk out of this house, you are no longer my daughter." The words should have devastated me. A few hours ago, they would have brought me to my knees, sent me scrambling to apologize and fix whatever was broken between us. But now they felt like a gift, like the final piece of clarity I needed to see this situation for what it really was. "Good," I said simply. "Because if this is what being your daughter means, I don't want the job anymore." Emily gasped, but I wasn't finished. I had 27 years of swallowed words and suppressed feelings that needed to come out. A real mother wouldn't use her daughter's life-threatening medical condition as a weapon. A real mother would be proud of her daughter's courage to build an independent life instead of resenting her for it. A real mother would want to meet her daughter's boyfriend, not ignore him and invite competition to make him feel unwelcome. "How dare you?" Amanda breathed. "How dare I what? Tell the truth? Stand up for myself? Refuse to let you treat me like garbage in my own family home?" I shouldered the last bag of groceries and looked around the kitchen one final time. "You know what the saddest part is? I drove 6 hours to get here because I missed you. I brought David because I wanted you to know the person I love. I spent a fortune on groceries because I wanted to contribute something beautiful to our family tradition. Then why are you destroying it?" Emily asked through her tears. "I'm not destroying anything, Em. I'm just refusing to pretend that poisoning me is an act of love." I walked over and hugged my sister, the only person in this house who'd shown me any genuine concern. You have my number. When you're ready to have a relationship that doesn't involve tolerating abuse, call me. Dad stepped in front of the kitchen door, blocking my exit. Ashley, you're making a huge mistake. Family is everything. Without us, you're just another struggling artist in a city full of dreamers. Without you, I'm a successful businesswoman with people in my life who respect and support me, I corrected. With you, I'm apparently a burden who should be grateful for the privilege of being slowly poisoned at the dinner table. We're not trying to poison you, he insisted. We're trying to help you grow up and stop making everything about yourself. David stepped up beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. Mr. Patterson, with respect, planning a dinner around food that could hospitalize your daughter isn't helping anyone grow up. It's child abuse, and Ashley is brave for refusing to accept it. The simple, clear way he stated the truth cut through all the gaslighting and manipulation like a knife. Yes, this was abuse. Yes, I was brave for refusing to accept it. Yes, I deserved better than this. Get out of my way, Dad, I said firmly. I have groceries to load and a life to get back to. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to physically stop me, but something in my voice, or maybe in David's protective stance beside me, made him step aside. Fine, he said coldly. But don't come crawling back when your little fantasy life falls apart. I won't, I promised, and walked out of that kitchen with my head held high and my arms full of groceries that were going to feed people who actually wanted me around. As we loaded the bags into David's car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The November air was crisp and clean, free of the stifling atmosphere of manipulation and resentment I'd been breathing inside the house. Are you okay? David asked softly as we settled into the car. I'm perfect, I said, and for the first time all weekend, I meant it completely. The drive back to Seattle should have been devastating. 6 hours to process the complete destruction of my relationship with my birth family, the ugly truth about what they really thought of me, the realization that the people I'd loved most in the world saw me as a burden they'd been carrying for 27 years. Instead, it was liberating. I can't believe what I just witnessed, David said about an hour into the drive, when the shock had worn off enough for him to speak. Ashley, I am so sorry. Nothing you told me about your family prepared me for that level of cruelty. I don't think I really saw it clearly until today, I admitted, watching the familiar Ohio landscape blur past. I kept making excuses for them, assuming they meant well but just didn't understand. I never considered that they might understand perfectly and just not care. The shellfish thing. David shook his head in disbelief. That wasn't just inconsiderate. That was deliberately dangerous. They could have killed you. I know. The words should have been terrifying, but instead they felt like a revelation. They knew exactly what they were doing. It was a test to see how much I'd tolerate to keep their approval. And you failed their test beautifully, David said with a proud smile. You chose your own safety and dignity over their manipulation. That takes incredible strength. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since we'd left, but I'd turned off the sound and ignored it. Now, as we stopped for gas, I finally looked at the messages. Dozens of texts from Amanda, Dad, and even Connor, ranging from guilt trips to threats to desperate attempts at damage control. You're being incredibly selfish and childish, one from Amanda read. We opened our home to you and your boyfriend, and this is how you repay us? Your mother is heartbroken, Dad had written. I hope you're proud of yourself for destroying our family over a dinner menu. But it was Connor's message that made me laugh out loud. I drove 2 hours to see you, and you embarrassed me in front of your family. You owe me an apology. Listen to this, I said, reading Connor's text to David. He thinks you owe him an apology? David's voice was incredulous. For what, exactly? Not falling to your knees in gratitude that he showed up uninvited to your family dinner. Apparently, I'm supposed to be grateful that he participated in their little intervention. I scrolled through more messages, watching the tone shift from anger to desperation as the hours passed. They're really panicking now that I actually left. What are you going to do? David asked as we got back on the highway. Block their numbers for now, I said without hesitation. I need time to think without being bombarded with guilt trips and manipulation. That sounds healthy. You know what sounds even healthier? Using these groceries to make Thanksgiving dinner for people who actually want to spend time with me. David's face lit up. My parents would love to have us. They're just doing a quiet dinner at home, but they've been wanting to meet you for months. Are you sure? I don't want to impose, especially last minute. Ashley, my mom has been begging me to bring you home since our third date. She'll probably cry with happiness when I call to ask if we can join them. He was right. When David called his parents from the next rest stop, his mother Sarah practically squealed with delight. Of course, bring Ashley. I've been dying to meet her. We'll set 2 more places, and she can tell us all about her design business. Dad's been following her Instagram, and he's fascinated by her work. Following my Instagram. Being fascinated by my work. Wanting to hear about my design business instead of dismissing it as a hobby. The contrast with my birth family was stark and painful. They seem wonderful, I said as David ended the call. They are. And they're going to love you because you're incredible, not in spite of some imaginary flaws that need fixing. We drove the rest of the way to Seattle in comfortable conversation, planning how we'd cook the Thanksgiving feast I'd originally intended for my family. David's parents lived in a cozy neighborhood near the university, and when we pulled up to their craftsman-style house with its welcoming front porch and overgrown garden, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in days. Sarah emerged before we'd even finished unloading the car, a petite woman with David's gentle eyes and an immediate warmth that enveloped me like a hug. Ashley, I'm so happy to finally meet you, she said, embracing me without hesitation. David talks about you constantly. We feel like we already know you. Thank you so much for having us on such short notice, I said, genuinely grateful. I brought groceries for Thanksgiving dinner if you're interested in cooking together. Are you kidding? I've been stuck in a rut with the same menu for years. Show me what you brought and let's create something amazing. David's father Tom appeared with the same easy warmth, helping us carry bags and asking thoughtful questions about my design work that showed he'd actually paid attention to my social media posts. Within an hour, I was standing in their kitchen helping Sarah prep vegetables while she told me embarrassing stories about David's childhood. He was such a serious little boy, she said, laughing as she peeled sweet potatoes. Always trying to fix things that weren't broken, always worried about making sure everyone was happy. He still does that, I said, watching David and Tom assemble the dining room table with extra leaves to accommodate our feast. It's one of my favorite things about him. He's different since he met you, Sarah said quietly. Lighter. More confident. We were starting to worry he'd never find someone who appreciated how special he is. I'm the lucky one, I said, meaning every word. As we cooked together, I found myself sharing the story of what had happened with my family. Sarah listened without judgment, offering support and perspective that helped me process the trauma of the last few days. Family isn't about blood, she said finally, as we basted the organic turkey that was turning golden brown in her oven. It's about love, respect, and showing up for each other. You chose to show up for them, and they chose to use that against you. That says everything about their character and nothing about yours. I feel guilty for feeling relieved, I admitted. Shouldn't I be devastated about losing my family? Honey, you didn't lose your family. You escaped from people who were hurting you. There's a big difference. That evening, as we sat around the table sharing what we were grateful for, I realized I'd never felt more at home anywhere. Tom expressed gratitude for getting to meet the woman who makes our son so happy. Sarah was thankful for new friends and the chance to cook with someone who shared her love of fresh ingredients. David was grateful for my courage and strength and for the reminder that family is something you choose. When it was my turn, I looked around the table at these people who'd welcomed me without conditions, who'd listened to my story without judgment, who'd made space for me in their lives and their traditions without a second thought. I'm grateful for learning the difference between people who love you and people who want to control you, I said. And I'm grateful for finding out that real family has nothing to do with sharing DNA. The next week, I sent a carefully written email to my birth family, setting clear boundaries about future contact. I explained that I was open to rebuilding our relationships if they were willing to acknowledge their behavior and commit to treating me with basic respect and consideration. I made it clear that my allergies, my career, and my relationship were not topics for debate or manipulation. Emily responded within hours, apologizing for not standing up to our parents more forcefully and asking if we could talk privately. I agreed, and we began the slow process of rebuilding our sister relationship on healthier terms. Amanda, Dad, and Connor never responded to my email. Their silence spoke volumes about their priorities and their willingness to change. Do you miss them? David asked one evening as we cuddled on our couch in Seattle, planning our next design project together. I miss the people I thought they were, I said honestly. But I don't miss walking on eggshells or feeling like I have to earn love that should be unconditional. Good, he said, kissing the top of my head. You deserve so much better than that. I know, I said, and for the first time in my life, I actually believed it. The months following our disastrous Thanksgiving were transformative in ways I never could have anticipated. What started as the worst holiday of my life became the catalyst for the most authentic, peaceful period I'd ever experienced. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and narcissistic abuse patterns. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that I'd been raised in a family system where love was conditional on compliance, where my worth was tied to how little space I took up and how few needs I expressed. My allergies hadn't been seen as a medical condition requiring accommodation. They'd been framed as a character flaw that made me inconvenient and demanding. You were scapegoated, Dr. Martinez explained during one of our sessions. When a family system is dysfunctional, they often choose one member to blame for all the problems. Your allergies, your independence, your career choices, they were all just excuses to make you the problem child, so they didn't have to examine their own issues. Understanding the psychological dynamics helped, but the real healing came from building a life surrounded by people who valued me exactly as I was. David's family embraced me completely, including me in their traditions and celebrations without ever making me feel like an outsider. His mother, Sarah, and I became genuinely close, bonding over cooking and gardening and the shared experience of loving David. My design business flourished as I channeled my creative energy into work instead of trying to manage family drama. Without the constant stress of wondering what my birth family thought of my choices, I took bigger risks, pursued more ambitious projects, and built a client base that respected my artistic vision and paid me appropriately for my expertise. The most surprising development was reconnecting with Emily on our own terms. She reached out regularly, and we began building an adult sister relationship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. She admitted that she'd always known our parents' treatment of me was wrong, but hadn't known how to challenge it without becoming their next target. I was a coward, she said during one of our video calls. I let them abuse you because it meant they left me alone. You were surviving, I corrected. We both were. The difference is that now we're choosing to thrive instead. Emily eventually went to therapy herself and started setting boundaries with Amanda and Dad. She stopped participating in their criticism of me and refused to relay their attempts at manipulation. It was hard for her, but she said watching me choose my own happiness had inspired her to do the same. 1 year later, David proposed during our own Thanksgiving celebration with his family. He'd planned it perfectly, knowing that reclaiming the holiday that had once represented my worst nightmare would mean everything to me. As he got down on one knee in Sarah's kitchen, surrounded by the smell of turkey and the warmth of people who loved us both, I realized that my birth family's rejection had been the greatest gift they could have given me. Ashley, David said, his voice shaking with emotion, you are the strongest, most courageous person I know. You've shown me what it means to choose love over fear, authenticity over approval. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams and celebrating your incredible spirit? Through happy tears, I said yes to a future with someone who saw my allergies as a medical condition to accommodate, my career as a source of pride, and my independence as a strength to be admired. Our wedding was small and perfect, filled with chosen family and friends who'd supported us through every challenge. Emily was my maid of honor, having finally found the courage to attend despite our parents' threats to disown her for participating. David's parents walked me down the aisle, symbolically claiming me as their daughter in every way that mattered. Amanda, Dad, and Connor were not invited. They'd made no effort to apologize or change their behavior, and I'd learned that protecting my peace was more important than maintaining relationships that required me to diminish myself. Do you ever regret cutting them off? People sometimes asked. I regret that it took me 27 years to realize I deserved better. I always answered honestly. But I don't regret choosing my own well-being over their comfort. The business continued to grow beyond my wildest dreams. I specialized in branding for companies that prioritized sustainability and social responsibility, work that felt meaningful and aligned with my values. Several of my designs won industry awards, and I was invited to speak at conferences about building authentic brand identities. During one of these speaking engagements, I shared my story about learning to set boundaries with toxic family members. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out to share their own experiences with conditional love and family manipulation. I realized that my journey from people pleaser to boundary setter wasn't just personal healing. It was a story that could help others recognize their own worth. I started incorporating this message into my business, working with clients who'd been told their dreams were unrealistic or their goals were selfish. I specialized in helping people build brands that reflected their authentic selves rather than what others expected them to be. Your business is an extension of your healing, Dr. Martinez observed during one of our sessions. You're helping other people find their voices because you found yours. 3 years after that terrible Thanksgiving, David and I hosted our own holiday dinner in our new house. We'd bought a beautiful craftsman home with a big kitchen and a dining room that could seat 12. The table was filled with friends who'd become family, colleagues who'd become close confidants, and Emily who'd driven up from Portland with her new boyfriend who actually supported her therapy journey and encouraged her independence. As we went around the table sharing what we were grateful for, I reflected on how different my life looked from the future my birth family had tried to force me into. Instead of settling for Connor's suburban dreams and my parents' narrow definition of success, I'd built something entirely my own. A marriage based on mutual respect and shared values. A career that challenged me creatively while providing financial independence. A chosen family that celebrated my quirks instead of trying to fix them. I'm grateful for the worst Thanksgiving of my life, I said when it was my turn to share. Because it taught me that family isn't about obligation or blood relation. It's about showing up for each other with love, respect, and genuine care. It's about accommodation without resentment, celebration without conditions, and support without strings attached. Emily squeezed my hand across the table, her eyes bright with tears of understanding. I'm grateful for second chances, she added. And for sisters who model what healthy relationships look like. Later that evening, as David and I cleaned up the kitchen together, I thought about the journey from that humiliating confrontation in Amanda's kitchen to this moment of pure contentment in my own home. What are you thinking about? David asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. How grateful I am that I finally learned to trust my instincts, I said. For so long, I let other people tell me what I should want, what I should value, how I should live. When I started listening to my own voice instead, everything changed. Your instincts led you to me, he pointed out with a smile. My instincts led me to myself, I corrected. You just happened to be smart enough to fall in love with the real me instead of trying to change me into someone else. The final lesson from my journey was perhaps the most important. Love shouldn't require you to become smaller, quieter, or less than who you are. Real love, whether romantic, familial, or friendship, celebrates your authentic self and wants you to flourish. Anyone who demands that you dim your light to make them comfortable isn't offering love. They're offering control disguised as care. Sometimes people ask if I ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed for that seafood dinner, if I'd swallowed my pride and tried to make peace with my family's treatment. The answer is simple. I would have taught them that my boundaries were negotiable, my safety was optional, and my happiness was less important than their comfort. I would have stayed small and grateful for crumbs of conditional acceptance instead of building a feast of genuine love and respect. Walking out of that kitchen with my arms full of groceries wasn't just about taking food to people who appreciated it. It was about taking myself to people who appreciated me. It was about choosing abundance over scarcity, authenticity over approval, and my own well-being over everyone else's comfort. If you're watching this story and recognizing patterns in your own family relationships, I want you to know that you deserve unconditional love, basic respect, and consideration for your safety and well-being. You deserve people in your life who celebrate your successes instead of minimizing them, who accommodate your needs without resentment, and who see your independence as strength rather than betrayal. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Have you experienced the pressure to stay in toxic relationships because family is everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage to choose themselves. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about finding your authentic voice and building the life you actually want. Share this video with anyone who might need the reminder that chosen family is just as valid and valuable as biological family, and that walking away from toxicity isn't giving up on love, it's making space for healthier love to grow. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we celebrate courage, authenticity, and the radical act of choosing ourselves. I'm sending you all so much love and gratitude for your support, and I hope your own journey toward authentic relationships brings you the same peace and joy I've found. Until next time, remember that you are worthy of love that doesn't require you to earn it, compromise your safety, or become someone you're not. Trust your instincts, set your boundaries, and never apologize for taking up space in your own life.